So yeah, Kurt Zuma would be my answer for this one. Literally the happiest bloke I've ever met in my entire life. Infectious. He was laughing and had like the best smile, and genuinely just such a lovely bloke. And I think some players just get it.
Let's talk about your route into working for Sky, because I've heard you speak about this. I think it was when you had Laura Woods on your podcast, and she was saying how the traditional route is to come through as a runner. You really start from the bottom and work your way up. But am I right in saying your route was a little bit different, let's say?
Yeah, definitely. I get stick from Laura occasionally on this, and Smithy as well, because they really earned their stripes, genuinely. Like, they absolutely grafted. They came in and they'd do unpaid work. They'd be making cups of tea for people. They'd be doing everything they could to try and get their way and they get their foot into the door. But myself, I got an apprenticeship straight out of A-levels. So I did my A-levels, applied for every single apprenticeship under the sun, and got a few interviews. I remember getting offered a job at a company called Digit, and I accepted it. And I said to them, okay, I'll accept this, but on the premise that I can go to an interview, because I've got a second stage interview at Sky Sports. And I remember the man saying to me, yeah, fair enough, mate, not a problem. Go to that. And if you don't get it, then yeah, come back. So that was really nice of them. And I went to that, got the job, and yeah, started working as an apprentice. And it's not lost on me how lucky I am to do that, because like I say, people genuinely graft for years to get the opportunity to then get a job where they're working on sport. And I was in straight at the time working with, and I know it doesn't carry as much weight coming from someone who works at Sky Sports, but genuinely the people that I work alongside every day are the best in their industry. So you'll have someone who's, for example, curating a lot of the work that we do on Photoshop. That person is one of the best Photoshop users ever that I've ever come across, and I've got the opportunity to work alongside him, and then people who create podcasts and people who produce interviews, and obviously the talent who interview people. Every single person who is in their craft is the top of their craft, because they're working for Sky Sports ultimately. So to work off those people, to me, was, and I haven't been to university, so I can't completely align it next to what it would have been like to go to university, but for me, that was almost the best education I could ever ask for. Because I watched a TED Talk the other day, actually, and it was about people who produce online courses. And there's a lot of snobbery towards online courses, because obviously they are seen as a way for people to kind of create some money from their followers. But ultimately, isn't it arguably better to get education off someone who's actually done something firsthand in the industry that they work in and can educate you on how they did it, than perhaps a professor who's been working in a university for maybe 10, 20 years, but hasn't actually worked in the industry themselves? And especially in social media and digital media, it's moving so fast. And where digital media is today versus where it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it's completely seismic, the difference. So to work off people who are having to adapt and learn and grow these massive accounts, for me, was just amazing. And it's allowed me to be quite well-rounded in what I do, and learn from every single person and take on a bit of everything of what people do.
Do you think that you've changed quite a lot since you started your apprenticeship there, as a person, but also professionally, of course?
Mate, I hope I've changed as much as I think I have, but I remember the person who walked through that door, and it's tough to say because I was 18 at the time, and it's you shouldn't beat yourself up too much about the way you were at the time, because ultimately you can't change it. But I think it's important to look back on where you were and assess where you were at that time. And I think there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and I was definitely towing that line quite. I was right on that line, and I think to some people I was misconstrued. I think I was just very much in awe of the opportunity that I had, and I was trying to take it in and soak as much information off people as possible. But also I've got a self-confidence, and if people could have misconstrued that at the time, but I think the person I am now and what I've learned from people and how important it is to be nice to people and to work with people and make sure that they want to work alongside you, because ultimately it's a very small industry that we work in and word gets around, and it's just important to be nice to people, I think. And that's the way that I've changed the most. And I hope that people who met me when I was 18 and still know me now when I'm 25 will think that I'm a completely different person, because that's certainly how I look on myself.
On that note then, let's talk about about some of the nice players that you work with. Now, I know that you're a professional guy, so I'm not going to try and dig up some dirt and see who's the biggest brat on a shoot. But let's sort of see who you think was a few of these adjectives, pretty much. Who do you think was the most eloquent and comfortable in front of camera?
Yeah, interesting one. Nice way to phrase it as well. So eloquence, I would say, would go to Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, who I interviewed with Smithy in about 2019 when he was at Southampton, and we did a feature called FIFA Versus, which goes down quite well. But I remember he started speaking incredibly philosophically about life, and I came away from that interview and I genuinely, basically, my colleagues ripped me, because whenever I come back, or used to come back to the office after doing an interview, I'd be like, wow, that was the best interview I've ever done. That person was incredible. He's got such an outlook on life. And I'd be so hyped up, and everyone would just look at me and go, oh, you said that last week, mate. But honestly, Højbjerg was just, he spoke basically about how he's still friends with people that he grew up with and the importance of it, and how football's like such a fast changing environment. So he'd have friends at Southampton, for example, but then in a year's time they move on. So it's kind of like, it's almost a bit like, and I'm sure we'll come on to it later, a bit like traveling, when you have quite fleeting relationships with people, and you can't lock down a friendship with someone who in theory could move on and move to a different part of the country or a bit different part of the world in just a year's time. So yeah, he spoke about how the importance of being friends with his childhood friends and how that keeps him grounded. And I remember thinking, yeah, it was a very sound bloke.
Yeah, very valid point. Yeah, you're right with the traveling thing. You meet these people and you think, oh yeah, we're going to be friends forever. And then then a few months later, you've unfollowed them on Instagram and you're not asked anymore. What about the player who has been the most engaged in like the activities that you're doing, like really wants to throw themselves in and get involved?
Yeah, luckily enough, to be fair, we have quite a few of these, so it was quite hard to think of them, because we try and allow footballers to like put their personality across. So it's not going to be the best way to sum it up is we wouldn't want a footballer to be at all nervous about what we're going to do, because we approach interviews in quite a professional way, but equally we don't want to stitch anyone up, and we want to make sure they're aware of that right from the off, so they can relax into the interview, show them who we are and and show us who they are and everything about them. So yeah, Kurt Zouma would be my answer for this one. Literally the happiest bloke I've ever met in my entire life. Infectious. He was laughing and had like the best smile, and genuinely just such a lovely bloke. And I think some players just get it. And I think it tends to be the younger players. Some players just get what we're trying to do, know what we're after, and vice versa. And Kurt Zouma just absolutely got it, and he just gave us a great interview. And I think ultimately, when you look at it from a player's perspective as well, it's a great opportunity for them to show us who they are and become likable to fans. And a lot of the interviews we've done have opened up and shown a different side to people. And I think if you get fully on board with what we're trying to do as a footballer, there's definitely just as much in it for them as it is for us.
Yeah, we'll come on to that sort of approach that Sky have taken to like really calm the players. But now, what about the player that you've worked with that made you the most starstruck?
Yeah, so I'm going to drop some names, and I don't like name dropping because it's just embarrassing, really. But it's probably what you want. So I've worked with people like De Bruyne and Salah in the past, and people would necessarily probably think they would be the players I'd be most starstruck by. But genuinely, and I spoke about earlier, the kind of feeling of being a kid, the most starstruck I've ever been, right, is by Steve Sidwell.
Right.
Because genuinely, I remember going to the Medeski as a 10-year-old boy and watching Steve Sidwell spray balls around the centre of the park. And when you meet someone like that, your brain just goes straight back into how you felt at the time when you idolised that person, and nothing changes. So I remember, obviously, working with him. I worked with him on a show we did called The Football Social, and he came in, and Smithy was like nudging me and nudging Sidwell and going, oh, Alex is a Reading fan, like winding me up. And I remember just being like so nervous, but ultimately I was like, I get a picture with him. And I don't like to get pictures with people because it's obviously not the most professional thing to do. But I was like, you know what, this can be an exception to the rule, get a picture with him. And it was quite a proud moment to me, to be fair.